the devil within. Rights and responsibilities of the media in America. When people think about the media in America, people expect to get reliable news about the world around them. The media in America is taking advantage of those rights given to them by the First Amendment in order to make more money, and is failing to fulfill the responsibilities of reporting accurate news. Since the founding of America, the way the media covers news has become more sensationalized and inaccurate. The First Amendment was created to allow freedom of speech, freedom of press, and freedom of expression. This amendment was designed to guarantee that Americans' basic civil liberties would not be threatened by the government. An example of these rights is, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and petition the government for a redress of grievances. Today, many media outlets are taking advantage of these rights. These rights were included in the Constitution because American society needed to know what their government was doing. Common Sense was a pamphlet written by Thomas Paine on January 10, 1776. In this pamphlet, Paine explains that the British government was limiting the rights of the people. He argues that they need more freedom, rights, and responsibility. Paine argued that the freedom of press, expression, and speech would assure the power of the government would be kept in check. Paine is saying that all people have the right to information. The media's responsibility is to report this information truthfully. Throughout history, the media has not always fulfilled their responsibility to the American people. There are many examples of the media irresponsibly reporting news to make more money.
In the late 1800s, Joseph Pulitzer and William Garrison Hearst owned their own newspaper companies. Pulitzer owned the New York World and Hearst owned the New York Journal. The two newspaper companies were constantly competing for sales. When the American ship Maine was destroyed off the coast of Cuba, both newspapers quickly tried to be the first ones to report the story. The New York Journal published a newspaper with the headline titled "Destruction of the Warship Maine was the Work of an Enemy" on February 15, 1898. They published that the Spanish blew up the ship without truly fulfilling their responsibility of telling the whole truth, hoping that it would boost sales for their company. Hearst sent a group of reporters to Cuba to monitor the war. When reporters sent Hearst a telegram telling him that not a lot was happening, Hearst realized that if he could get more people to buy his papers, he could also influence the president. He thought that he could use the papers to gain power and money. To do this, he needed people to become excited, and that meant changing the truth. Hearst famously replied to a telegram from reporters he had sent to Cuba that if you furnish the pictures, I'll furnish the war. While historians dispute if this telegram exchange took place, Hearst used his images, articles, and newspaper sales to pressure the U.S. government. His newspaper told stories about cruelty and brutality, changing Americans' thoughts about America's involvement in Cuba. He eventually helped cause the president to sign a bill that entered America into the war through his dramatized stories and the way it made people think through his irresponsible reporting. World War I ended, and people were living in fear of communism. Later that year, on February 6th to February 10th, 60,000 people in Seattle went on strike, and the media increased people's fear with sensationalized headlines such as crimes against society, conspiracies against the government, and plots to establish communism. They did this because the newspaper companies wanted to make people buy their product. Long after the Seattle strike, the Boston police force went on strike on September 9th. Boston experienced looting, vandalism, and very little rioting. Newspapers over-exaggerated to sell more money and irresponsibly told stories about federal troops firing guns on a mob, massive riots, and reigns of terror. Raids, deportations, and arrests that the government made against alleged radicals and leftists were on the front page of newspapers. In May of 1920, 12 attorneys issued a report detailing the Justice Department's violations of civil liberties. People who were anti-communist realized that deporting alleged communists drained a major source of labor, and newspapers that had earlier been against Reds were now using Red hunters as their objects of ridicule to gain more profit. Nowadays, this lack of responsibility has gotten even worse, but not exactly for the reason of profit. When the Aurora Batman shooter James Holmes was taken into custody, media outlets were on the story immediately. First, the news decided to not fully check how many people were truly injured. They originally said that 12 people had died and that 56 were injured, but they had to change this information later on. It was changed so that it now told us the real number of victims. It was truly 12 people dead, 70 people injured. Another way the media screwed up was when they tried to report why Holmes actually shot those innocent people. One conspiracy states that Robert Holmes, James Holmes' father, brainwashed him and forced James to do that, hoping that it would cause him not to have to appear in court for a scandal his bank was going through. This conspiracy was later proven wrong when police discovered that Holmes had been planning the attack for a long time and other information. Another conspiracy says that there were 2 people shooting in the theater because they found another gas mask left in the theater. So, this helps prove that the media isn't fulfilling their responsibilities because they are coming up with stories about Holmes before making sure they have accurate information and reporting a false amount of victims. We have just seen that over the years, the media has failed multiple times at fulfilling their responsibilities and using their rights to freedom of speech as an excuse to manipulate these stories or to just tell complete lies. People have used the media to influence people's opinions, tell lies, and make things seem worse than they are. This is happening more often nowadays, causing us to ask ourselves,